So that's the nature of economics. It is debt-oriented. The only possible result is an exponential debt curve, which if you look at the graphs right now, the graph of the late 90s is like going like that right now. The 16 central banks of Europe, as of May 1994, will no longer buy long-term treasury notes or government bonds. The only thing that has kept our standard of living afloat for the last 40 years is because the dollar has been artificially floated by the central banks of Europe because they wanted to maintain the productivity of the American people. Until one, they confiscated all the property, and number two, they'd installed the police state to police the residue and the social disintegration that would result once the bankruptcy was finally declared. That is the only political agenda, that's the only economic agenda, and it's the only legal agenda at this point. To make a very complex story very simple, bankruptcy is the key word. And that's why the courts are as busy as they are, and the police are as busy as they are, writing traffic citations, and the IRS is busy seizing property, and they're seizing property for drug forfeitures and forfeiting property all kinds. Man, go to the government auctions, they're great. You hear them advertise all the time. Brand new cars, no minimum bid. All these government forfeitures and seizures, they have so much property they've confiscated from the American people, they don't even know how to get rid of it. They can't even warehouse it. There's a warehouse up in Portland that has like 5,000 vehicles in it. They can't even get rid of this stuff. But it's really all they're doing is they're shuffling the titles around, the securities. They're trying to keep the doors of government open at every level. And since they passed the impounding codes here recently in California, and I know because I've had my vehicle impounded twice in 2 days when I came down my last trip. I have the inside scoop on dealing with impounds here. Welcome to California. I was within 5 miles of the border, I was impounded. Welcome to California. Well, because I'm one of those nutcases that was driving around without license plates or without driver's licenses, and I had flags waving out the back of my window saying, "Come and get me."
How'd you get your car back?
There's nothing a little bit of paper won't do to solve your problems, to get you back on the road again. But in the meanwhile, I have plenty of grist for the mill in my right to travel cases in Oregon and California, and the Title 42 lawsuits that are forthcoming, and the administrative procedures which we are perfecting, and the admiralty cross claims, and the maritime procedures that we're developing in the court systems are all so that we can basically draw the line in the sand again and try to reestablish what was once our right to travel. That was, but see, your minds are working great. You see, you didn't skip a beat. You went right through. You got the whole thing, right? I could go off on a lot of tangents, and I try to hold to my subject here. Otherwise, we'll be talking about my right to travel case and jail and all that stuff, which isn't as much fun to talk about as the stuff we're talking about now. So
Come back again.
I'll come back again and we'll talk about those things. I was talking about the impounding, and the reason that they have the impounding laws here, the reason they've passed them and are aggressively enforcing them is because the governments are desperate for revenue. And it depends on the county. It really varies. Up in Palo Alto, where there's lots of wealthy people, and and they really don't need to extract revenue from the parking meters, like they really could care about the quarter, and so they don't enforce as aggressively in a Palo Alto as they do in Oakland, where in Oakland they're out on the streets 24 hours a day. They've got police cars patrolling every street with a tow truck behind them. They're checking on every license plate as they drive down the street, and if you've got an outstanding parking ticket, they steal your car on the spot. So it depends on where you live, partly, and how desperate your local government is as to how much they want to enforce these things. There's a whole lot of variance here with right to travel cases. Some people actually get to travel around in their counties without too much harassment. They may know the county sheriff a little better than I do. But other people are attacked all the time for doing those things. So if you take on those issues, I say go for it. But not everybody has to be out there dealing with the right to travel issue. I'm not suggesting everybody go out there and take all the plates off your cars tomorrow and all go get arrested and get impounded and all that. There's other ways of dealing with it if you can still become a sovereign citizen. And what I have done on this trip, I bought another car and I have registered it in a trust. So I am no longer, don't have this property. My trust has this property, so I don't have the flags flying out the back window on this trip. So I could actually get here tonight and to make all the other 7 seminars I had scheduled down here. Because that's a bit of a hassle when you can't get where you're going. So there's more important things sometimes. But that's the underlying agenda behind a lot of these aggressive laws and a lot of the police on the streets and all that. And so having that information is real important because it's a piece of the communications that we have to have with our government, with our local governments and with the police officers. I've had incredible conversations with police officers, even while I'm sitting in the back of the patrol car in handcuffs, having these incredible constitutional conversations with them. And it's just wonderful. Of course, I've also heard a few deriding comments like, you know, there's about 4 or 5 police over here, and they're going, "Is that one of those constitutionalists over there?" That's what they call me. I said, "Why do you call me a constitutionalist with a degrading tone of voice? Didn't you also uphold an oath of allegiance to the Constitution? Do you have a different Constitution than I do? If so, I'd like to see it." There's only one Constitution, so how is it that a constitutionalist is a degrading, insulting term? How come Janet Reno gets on TV and says them constitutionalists, those sovereign citizens, those state citizens, those militia people are all domestic terrorists, and they're all white supremacists, and they're all racists, da-da-da-da-da. I don't want to be all thrown in that big pot, you see. Not that it's not good company. It's just that I think we need to make some clear distinctions here. That, yeah, this isn't, you know, a recruiting group for the militia. This is a forum where people can freely express what's on their minds. I mean, after all, freedom of speech and all that. And regardless of whatever your point of view might be, or regardless of what your politics may be, whether it's left or right, I happen to presently believe that left or right is irrelevant. That it makes no difference. And we've got to stop pointing fingers at liberals or conservatives or Republicans or Democrats, and all that is a distraction that keeps the American people divided from the real issues and the real ones who are trying to take over here. And I find that to be a healthy sign that in the lectures and in the workshops that I do, that it is not a homogeneous group. That there are all kinds of Americans coming to these groups. And people who genuinely disagree with each other. And that's fine. How else are you going to learn anything unless you dialogue with somebody who you don't agree with? But you can have a healthy communications if you have a healthy listening and the ability to listen to someone else. You might really learn something. That everybody has a piece of the truth. Everybody knows a little bit of it. And our job is to put it all together so we can make sense of it. And that we can go forward. So that's about all I need to say about the economic system. We've looked at the political system. We know that it's linked into the bankruptcy. We know the foreign powers are directing it. And the creditors of the federal United States. The economic system is a debt-oriented system. It is bankrupt financially, morally, and politically. We need to reinvent another economic system. And you can do that. We've done that up in the Northwest and a number of other places. There's a little book back there called the Cascadia Hour. We actually created our own money system, you see. We figured, well, if these are short and everybody's kind of clawing around trying to get enough of them, we'd create our own money system, which is what we did. We created what we call the Cascadia Hour. We just paid some paper up just like the Federal Reserve did. Only this time we called it a Cascadia Hour, which has a $10 equivalency, and we can use this within our community to buy goods and services as supplemental to this. Doesn't completely replace this, because yeah, some things, I can't go to the gas station and take those right now. But there's other things in the community that people do take. And all we had to do is print some currency. We granted it into circulation 5 hours per person, and they paid like $5 or $10 into this little fund. Then we printed up a directory of all the people that were willing to accept and spend it. And then you could go shopping in the directory and use this instead of this. And you got an economy going. People didn't realize... Thank you. People forgot, unless there's some of us who are old enough to remember the Great Depression. I don't know. Is there anybody here old enough to remember? Okay. Do you remember local scripts? Do you remember that there was, in this country, over 1,000 local scripts created during the Great Depression? Communities got together and created some kind of money system because there was no more of these.